Shall we do The Railway
The
Man?
Railway Man with Colin Firth, yes.
Okay, so The Railway Man with Colin Firth and Nicole Kidman and some other people like Jeremy Irvine. So it's based on the true story of Eric Lomax, which is a story which has been told several times before. Obviously, Eric Lomax's own memoir. There's a documentary called Enemy My Friend. There was an episode of the Everyman series, which was Prisoners of Time, which had John Hurt as Eric Lomax. The story was that Eric Lomax was a prisoner of war in the Second World War, and he was forced to work on the Death Railway, the Thai-Burma Railway. And in the case of the Railway Man, what happens is we meet him much later on in England, in which he's living this kind of purgatorial twilight existence. He's still a railway enthusiast, but he has wartime memories that are haunting and tormenting him, but nobody really knows what's going on inside his head, because like so many of his fellow soldiers, he doesn't want to talk about the stuff that he suffered during the war. And whilst he's on a train journey, because he says very clearly, I'm not a train spotter, I'm a railway enthusiast. It's a different thing. While he is on a railway journey, he has a chance, nay brief, encounter with Nicole Kidman.
Well, I'd never been to the Highlands before, so suddenly finding myself single again, so to speak, I thought I'd like to see them. So I'm going to go up as far as Malay by train, and then I'm catching the coach to Inverness and coming down the other side. What do you think?
The West Coast is extraordinarily beautiful. You might well fall in love with it.
And if I were to fall in love, what then?
Well, instead of a coach to Inverness, you might consider taking the line back to Tyndrum and changing for Oban. And from there, you can get any number of boat trips. Iona, Stafford. It's very romantic. You romantic?
Colin Firth and Nicole Kidman. Now, the thing with the Eric Lomax story is that it has been told often, and I think to some extent people therefore know the outcome, but I'm presuming that there may be some people listening who don't necessarily know what happens. So I'm going to be slightly circumspect in talking about it. I've noticed in some of the other reviews people have just assumed that everyone knows exactly what did happen in the end, but I think for dramatic, since what we're talking about is a dramatic reconstruction, there's no point in saying you all know how this played out. But essentially, the underlying thing is that his character, as played in later life by Colin Firth, is tormented and haunted by memories of what happened during the war, and is also consumed with fantasies of vengeance about the translator who persecuted him whilst he was a prisoner. And the more this eats up at him, the more his personal life appears to be falling apart, because he can't, he's suffering some form of being a post-traumatic stress disorder. And there has to be some resolution. There has to be some way of confronting this. Now, the way the story is told is that we flip backwards and forwards between, on the one hand, the later stuff, which is Colin Firth and Nicole Kidman, and on the other hand, the wartime memories in which Jeremy Irvine plays the character who later on we see as Colin Firth. On the good front, Jeremy Irvine does a terrific job of it's not just the vocal mannerisms, although that is an awful lot of it. He gets the physical mannerisms right as well. You do get, often you see a thing in a film which if they do a broken back time structure, you have that problem, which is that the two bits don't look like they match up. A character playing a young, but a character playing an old, but they just don't look like the same people. You say he looked like that when he was 20, now he looks like that. They're not the same people. And the way that you bring those things together is often to do with the mannerisms. It's to do with the with the stance. It's a lot of it is to do with physicality, but a lot of it is also to do with vocal inflections. And Jeremy Irvine does a brilliant job. It's like he sat down and really properly studied how it is that Colin Firth, because Colin Firth plays a character which is much closer to what you'd imagine Colin Firth doing. I mean, if you see, you've seen A Single Man, right? He does that kind of thing about uptight, repressed Britishness, big pair of spectacles, gently understated, but the sense of, underneath that, still waters run deep, that there is sort of, broiling, repressed pain, but it's all behind this kind of rather British exterior, which is something, that's a range which Colin Firth does particularly well. I mean, here, I don't think it's not an outstanding performance by him. For a start, it's it's half the movie is him, the other half is obviously Jeremy Irvine, and oddly enough, I think of the two of them, Jeremy Irvine is probably doing the harder work, the harder lifting work. Nicole Kidman is slightly less certain. I mean, she's doing that thing about playing down, playing dowdy, but there are moments in which you wonder whether or not you're completely convinced that it is actually the character that you're looking at is Patty. It's not Nicole Kidman, despite the fact that actually some of it was filmed at Bowness, and the scenery and the steam train stuff is absolutely beautifully done. I mean, it's all right. The other problem is that the screenplay is co-written by Frank Cottrell Boyce, who I like very, very much. And Frank Cottrell Boyce is somebody who's very interested in salvation and redemption and those kind of those ideas, and that runs through almost everything he writes. and I think that's a great thing, and I'm a very, very big fan of his writing. The problem here is that the two halves don't quite marry up, the later stuff and the earlier stuff. And the structure of the film, which I think is a directorial thing, perhaps more than a screenplay thing, the story is told in a way which is oddly complicated, because in fact it has a very clear trajectory. It is a story of capture and suffering and then...
Can you stop banging the table, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Does it actually matter?
I get regular correspondence from people saying, "Can you please tell Mark to stop banging the table?"
Okay, can you give me like a cushion or something?
Well, hit you over the head with it.
That's that scene in Analyze This, isn't it? When Billy Crystal says to Robert De Niro, he says, "I'm full of this rage." He said, "Why don't you hit the cushion?" So Robert De Niro pulls out a gun and shoots the cushion and goes, "Yeah, I feel a lot better." Anyway,
carry on.
The two bits don't actually marry together. And when you consider how clear the arc is, when it is a story about pain and purgatory and redemption, and ultimately it's a story which is to do with the need for forgiveness, the need for healing, the need for reconciliation, which is obviously it's something which is very current. Somehow the film manages to flub that, so that you end up, I mean, actually there are times you end up going, hang on, what's Stellan Skarsgård's character doing now? Why are we there? Because I thought we were... And it's odd, the register of the film actually manages to confuse the very clear trajectory of the narrative. So it's not, I mean, it's, there are things about it that are impressive, not least of which is Jeremy Irvin's performance. I think he's an underrated actor who sometimes doesn't quite get, doesn't get appreciated in perhaps the way that he should do. But it's a sort of broken back structure that in the end is kind of... It's unsatisfying. And that's odd for a film which in real life has a very satisfying conclusion.